The focus of this lecture is to understand how did Germany conquer Europe, and the key is to understand Blitzkrieg. We talked a little bit about Blitzkrieg when they invaded in Poland from the west, and the Soviet Union invaded to the east, but it's really most effective when they defeat the British and the French in the fall of France. So we'll talk about that. The Maginot Line was supposed to defend the French, and it failed. The reason it failed is that the Germans went through the Ardennes forest to split the British and the French, and the British had to retreat at the Battle of Dunkirk. So here's a map of northwestern France in 1940. So the red here is the German. Here is the Ardennes forest, and here is the Maginot Line. The Maginot Line was the ultimate in trench warfare. The French had spent millions and millions of dollars building it up, and nobody thought that you could invade through the Ardennes forest because the roads wouldn't support tanks. They weren't strong enough. So what happened is they basically stopped building the Maginot Line here, and then they put all their troops. They had the British up here in the north, and they had the French down here in the south. So all the Germans had to do was to go through the Ardennes forest and split them, and that's actually what happened. So the Germans sneak through the Ardennes forest. The French and the British are completely surprised. They cut them off. They get all the way to the sea, and then the British, and you can see here BEF, that's British Expeditionary Force, they start to retreat here to Dunkirk, and there's a very famous retreat from Dunkirk, and they're absolutely routed. I mean, they leave equipment everywhere. They just run from the beach. Guys with like yachts, like your weekend cruisers, come across the English Channel and rescue soldiers and bring them back. So the British are demoralized, and stepping into that role to kind of lift the morale of the British is Winston Churchill. He's their British Prime Minister. He's very stalwart, and what that means is he never gives up. You could do anything to him, and he can survive just about anything. He's bomb-proof. And he gives a very famous speech called "We Shall Never Surrender." There's a picture of him, looking very tough and hanging on. So after that defeat at Dunkirk begins the Battle of Britain. Remember, Britain is an island, and so it's really difficult to attack. So there is evolved an air war between Britain and Nazi Germany called the Battle of Britain. And it goes on for about a year to 2 years, and the Germans just cannot defeat the British. Well, the British have radar, they have strong support from their pilots, and they ultimately defeat the Germans. Not necessarily defeat, but it's the first time that Hitler is stopped. So that's a better way of saying it. That's how I'm going to test you on, is that the Battle of Britain showed that Hitler could be stopped. There's a very good political cartoon kind of showing that, because here you have these air raids happening, and Hitler would offer peace after a while. In England, every time Hitler would offer peace to Churchill would go, "There's no way," and he would bite him off. So here's Hitler's peace and England's answer, the line of Britain holding off the German vultures. So the Germans realize that to fight modern blitzkrieg, you need oil. And the place to get oil is here in the Red Sea. You've got Saudi Arabia, which is a really strong producer. And how do you get that oil up to Europe? Well, you've got to take them through the Suez Canal. So whoever controls the Suez Canal can really control the flow of oil and therefore win the war. So the Germans send their allies, the Italians, and the Italians can't beat the British. So Hitler's got to come to Mussolini's rescue, and the British lose the Battle of Tobruk, which is way over here in north and the west of Africa. And the Germans have a very famous tank commander called Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox. And his whole concept of tank warfare is tanks never stay still. They're always moving, but tanks need a lot of gasoline. So this is the vital resource of the war. Whoever controls the gasoline is going to win. So Hitler realized this, and he's going to plan his attacks on the Soviet Union, which has large oil reserves in the Caucasus Mountains. So he's planning his attacks on the USSR, and he'd always thought that the Soviet Union was weak because it took him so long to defeat Finland. So he knows that he needs bases in Greece over here and in the Balkans area to defeat the Soviet Union. So after he fails in the Battle of Britain, he attacks in the Balkans again. He takes over this area. And then in 1941, he makes the biggest mistake of his career. He launches blitzkrieg upon the Soviet Union. It's called Operation Barbarossa. The Soviet Union responds by doing scorched earth policy, just like they did with Napoleon. They burn every supply. But Blitzkrieg is very successful in the summer, where they get actually all the way to Moscow in 1941. But the problem is they're overextended. Here is Berlin, here's Moscow, like way over here. So they cannot supply it, especially when the Russian winter sets in. So because Hitler had attacked to the east, he is now fighting a two-front war. He's got England over here to the west, Soviet Union here to the east, and he completely betrays Hitler, or completely betrays Stalin, the Non-Aggression Pact. So this is the biggest advance of the German Reich, the Third German Reich, and this is all the area conquered. After Operation Barbarossa, it's all retreats, retreats, retreats. So the reason that the British could hold on is because they had the U.S. support. Now, during the 1930s, the United States signed a series of laws called the Neutrality Acts, where they would not sell arms to foreign countries. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the U.S. president, gets around this problem by passing a law that says we can lend or lease arms. We can lend them to you, or you can rent them out. And then he finally signs an Atlantic Charter, and you're going to study a lot of this next year in U.S. history, but it's important background information. It's a joint declaration between Franklin Delano Roosevelt and Churchill saying that they support self-determination. So even before the U.S. gets involved in the war officially, they've already picked sides. They're going to side with the British. And so the Germans begin to sink the ships from America to British, and we're kind of in an undeclared naval war between the U.S. and Germany. And everybody thinks at any moment in 1941 that war is going to break out between U.S. and Germany, but it's actually a sneak attack in the Pacific, Battle of Pearl Harbor.